I had a quick question on, you said that there's uncertainty in the chemicals used during the hydraulic fracturing process. Have you ever heard of the website fracfocus.org? Okay, so it lists every single chemical used during the process, so you just said that you didn't know what they were, so you do know what they are.
It doesn't. It lists chemical compounds, right, but we don't know what all the ingredients of those compounds are.
All right. When was the last time you looked at the website?
Yeah, you can check it out. You can call EPA and find out as well.
Okay.
Because they know that not all, it's a trade secret, and that's fine. Corporations can have
Right, it's a proprietary, right. It's a business, that's what, right. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have two questions. I've been studying the negative both health and environmental impact of shale gas drilling for the last 3 years. And one question I have is a lot of landowners that run into problems in their leases they sign non-disclosure agreements, so they're not allowed to talk about some of the problem. And I was wondering if you have had that in your interviews, from a sociological standpoint. And the other question I had is, if you're talking about perceptions of risk, one of the categories you mentioned was the trusting of the sources of information. And I applaud Wilkes University for holding this forum. They're one of the leading local universities that hold this discussion on gas drilling. But I noticed in the disclaimer in the brochure that the project was funded by URS Energy and Construction. And if you look at URS Energy and Construction, you see that they kind of have their hands in contracting for oil and gas industry and related pipelines and mining services and things like that. So that's why there's a lack of trust sometimes in the sources of information that you
Okay, I'd like to clarify, actually our project is funded by Department of Energy. URS is just simply overseeing the work that we're doing, so we're not being funded by URS. So I apologize if that information is
through a short contract by URS that says it's funded.
We're funded by the Department of Energy.
URS is a contract with the Department of Energy. Yes, yes, and it actually became a big part of the beginning parts of my field work when I sought to bring together different landowners in a group setting to discuss what was happening on their land and their perceptions of their changes, but also just what the land meant to them. When I got a call one evening from a woman who was going to come to one of the focus groups, and she was devastated and in tears because she said that she and her husband had just met with their lawyer and she could no longer participate because they had a non-disclosure agreement in their lease. And that non-disclosure agreement, according to the lawyer, meant that she couldn't, discuss. She would not be able to discuss and participate in the part where I asked questions about, where's the water on your property? Where's the important places on your property? I don't know if that's really true. That would really hold up in the law, that's not disclosable. But that was their interpretation, and they were worried about losing money. And they're making off really well with a nice well on their property. So it was important to them that they get that money. But on the other hand, I could interview people privately. It was just the government itself, the government with the group process itself did not allow for that kind of shit. But yes, non-disclosure agreements are a tool that was used in Bath County and other parts of Pennsylvania and across the country, actually, to make sure that landowners did not talk to one another about the terms of their leases, and also, any kind of other problems that might come up. Yes.
So one of your slides showed an individual with a skin rash.
Yes.
Okay. That rash was in medical terms called pleural. And there are many reasons that can occur, not the least of which is exposure to various types of organic compounds, particularly important organic compounds. Do you have any kind of feel for or knowledge of the number of people, was that an isolated incident?
seeing that a lot.
That might be something for quantity.
I mean, I say a lot because in Bradford County, I only work with certain individuals,
That's
but in
something,
other
that's
parts.
something you want to look at.
Yep.
That's a disease incident issue. It's unusual.
I'd like to talk to you more about that.
Sure.
Okay, great. Questions? Yes.
You mentioned at one point, I believe, these landowners thought you were not really concerned about the water.
The forest landowners, the ones who had large tracts of forest lands, that was during the pilot part of the study, in the early parts of the study, when we were doing the mapping and asking questions, you know, and pictures and that type of thing. That wasn't something that came out. In continuing working with them, it is something that has come out. But I was trying to isolate us to our particular point in time.
So that even in town, it's got 3 miles of drilling, that's the most population. A lot of people seem to have this intuitive sense that over time, they're really going down the path of looking for waterfall, groundwater. We don't really decide date for this, they don't have any sort of samples perhaps, but feel that we get it all kinds of people. That's just scientific survey. Is that fair perception?
I think now it is today. When I started in 2009, 2010, no, not so much. And you know, you gotta wonder how much of it is what people are reading. And you know, of course, they're hearing things and they're seeing things, and there are people now that are coming home with rashes and gastrointestinal problems. If it's related to the water, we don't have the causal connection, so we can't say. But it's a question. I mean, it seems to be related to when people end up, you know, they have groundwater. Its terms changes, and then they end up having some other kind of problem. Yeah, I think it's about perception as well as the actual facts on the ground. That's what I was trying to get at.
In terms of the rashes,
I would say it's very similar to what those previous studies showed. In the way that, this whole four attitudes and the cycles of how communities react, their expectations, and their uncertainties, and all that's played out. And even some of the, recovery has played out, and adaptation to it all. I guess one thing that's different here, and I probably didn't make this point clear in this presentation, but it really is different than density here. And so in a lot of ways, maybe things are more rapid here. People are, seeing things in their backyards. Out in Colorado, not so much. There's larger land spans without people. So things would go on for a longer period of time. And that made huge changes that people saw. The gas workers might live near the site and not live in a town. And also in the rural towns out there, we're talking about lower population density.
So kind of on that, where that process, your last question,
Well, I think that it's the whole point of my talk. I think the next step is to stop debating and to solve these problems. But I think to do that, we have to ask the right questions. We have to ask the right questions in a way that is reflective of our own biases and perceptions, and maybe even our lack of trust in institutions and each other. Because I just see the fracking debate as something that can go on forever, because it is so entrenched in like the pro-gas, anti-gas rhetoric. Somehow that needs to be broken down. And one of the ways that we can change attitudes is by making people become more aware of their perceptions and where their perceptions come from. We're not used to having those conversations in this country. So that was my question while we helping for this. And you see in our politics, it's all about pro, anti, red, blue, Republican, Democrat. There's no other options, and there's tons of other options. There are. And I'm not just talking about fossil fuel versus renewables. I think that you can develop, I do think that we can develop natural gas. But my question is, should we be expending the amount of resources as a country, because we're giving billions of dollars in subsidies to this activity, should we be spending that amount of money? And not trying instead to spend it on how we really create grids and ways, systems, infrastructure for supplying energy we need through other sources, a variety of sources. And then those fossil fuels, there are reserves, there are backup. Why do we need them now? We have a lot of other options, including algae, which that's one of my favorites.
Okay, let me take the prerogative as the moderator, ask one final question. Hopefully this will be a quick one. And that is getting back to how you found communities interact with each other. To what degree has the digital revolution, specifically the rise of the internet, affected the way that people in Bradford County now interact with each other?
In Bradford County? Not at all.
So they're not connected?
Rural, I don't know, how many of you are from rural areas here in the United States? What do you consider rural? Well, in Bradford County, hardly anyone has internet. So when I first went to the county, my idea was I was going to have these focus groups
so Dr. Perry